They pushed me out of the company I helped build, but I had one final move they didn't expect. I built it from the garage up, while my brothers played CEO, in name only. The day my family's betrayal began started like any other Minnesota morning. Crisp air, the scent of coffee, and the familiar ping of new orders hitting our company inbox. My name is Sonia Walker. The same Sonia Walker whose face graced Forbes last month. But 10 years ago, I was just a 22-year-old business graduate with big dreams and a tiny desk in my father's fabric store. Sonia, these inventory sheets need sorting. Dad called as I navigated through narrow aisles stacked with fabric bolts. Charles Walker had owned Walker Fabrics since 1983, a humble Minneapolis storefront that perpetually smelled of cotton and dust. He believed in the American dream with the same faith he placed in his morning coffee. Already done, I replied, dropping a folder onto his cluttered desk. And I've updated the system to digital tracking. We were losing about 8% of inventory to manual errors. Dad looked at me over his reading glasses, pride and bewilderment mingling in his eyes. You're something else, kid. Mason and Tyler couldn't figure that out in 4 years of trying. My brothers. Mason, the oldest at 32, had an MBA he rarely used and an office he seldom occupied. Tyler, 29, was the people person who networked at golf courses more than he worked. Both had technically joined the family business, but neither seemed interested in growing it. They showed up for Sunday dinners, threw around buzzwords, and collected their salaries. Meanwhile, I was first to arrive and last to leave each day, learning every aspect of the business from scratch. Someone's got to keep this place running, I said with a shrug, turning to help Mrs. Abernathy, our most loyal customer, who just walked in. That was 2014. By 2016, I'd launched our online store. By 2018, e-commerce revenue had surpassed the physical shop. By 2020, I'd rebranded us as Walker & Company and pivoted from selling fabrics to designing and selling our own clothing line made from sustainable materials. It's a big risk, Dad had said, weathered hands wrapped around his coffee mug. The biggest risk is doing nothing, I'd replied, showing him months of market research. The fabric retail industry is dying. But people still need clothes, and they're increasingly willing to pay more for sustainable, ethical fashion. We have the connections, the knowledge, and now the online presence. We just need to evolve. He signed the papers that afternoon. Mason and Tyler had shrugged when I presented the plan. Whatever you think, Sonny, Mason had said, using my childhood nickname. Just don't expect us to stay up all night packing orders like you do. I didn't. I hired people instead, mostly women returning to the workforce, veterans seeking steady work, and creative young people overlooked by bigger companies. We transformed the storage area into a fulfillment center. I taught myself enough coding to build our first website, often working until 3 a.m. You're going to burn yourself out, my best friend Jenna warned over late-night tacos as I sketched designs. I'm just getting started, I'd said, too excited to feel tired. Our first collection, Sustainable Basics in extended sizes, sold out in 2 weeks. Our second caught a popular blogger's attention, and orders quadrupled overnight. By year 3, we'd moved to a proper warehouse, hired 30 employees, and hit $5 million in annual revenue. Through it all, my brothers remained figureheads. Mason took the title of CEO because Dad insisted the oldest should lead, a traditional value that felt increasingly outdated as I watched my brother delegate every actual responsibility. Tyler became our brand ambassador, which mostly meant attending industry parties. Your brothers are the face of the company, Dad would say whenever I raised concerns. People trust men in business, Sonia. That's just how it is. I'd bite my tongue, channeling my frustration into growth strategies. If I couldn't have the title, I'd have the impact. By 2023, Walker & Company had become a $20 million company with over 100 employees. We'd been featured in Vogue, praised for our sustainable practices, and developed a loyal customer base. I'd personally visited every factory and mill we worked with to ensure fair labor practices. What no one knew, not even my brothers, was that I'd created a silent safety net 2 years earlier. After watching a competitor collapse when their main supplier suddenly changed terms, I'd established Lakeside Supply LLC, a separate company under my name alone. Gradually, I'd transferred all our key supplier contracts through this entity: the Texas cotton mills, the organic dye vendors in Oregon, our eco-friendly packaging suppliers in Vermont. On paper, Walker and Company was buying from Lakeside, which was buying from the actual suppliers. Just streamlining operations, I'd explained when Dad questioned the new vendor name on invoices. The brothers never even noticed. It was insurance I never thought I'd need to cash in. "You've got the golden touch," Dad told me one evening as we reviewed quarterly numbers. At 68, he'd stepped back from day-to-day operations, but still loved to examine the reports. "This company wouldn't be half of what it is without you." "Thanks, Dad," I'd said, feeling a rare moment of recognition. I couldn't have predicted how quickly everything would change. The morning Dad had his stroke, I was reviewing samples for our fall collection. My phone rang, Tyler's voice uncharacteristically shaken. Dad collapsed at home. The ambulance is taking him to Minneapolis General. The next few weeks became a blur of hospital corridors and monitoring equipment beeps. Dad survived, but the stroke left him unable to speak clearly and partially paralyzed. Recovery would take months. I didn't notice it then, too focused on Dad's care, but something shifted in my brothers. They huddled in corners, speaking in low voices that stopped when I approached. They started taking mysterious lunch meetings. Mason began asking questions about financials and contracts. "Just trying to take some burden off you," he'd said when I questioned him. "You've got enough to worry about with Dad." I believed him. That was my first mistake. I didn't know then that they were planning my exit, meeting with Gavin Brooks, a New York venture capitalist with a reputation for aggressive strategies. I didn't know that everything I'd built was about to be taken away. But I was about to find out. In America, success gets you respect, unless you're the woman who outshines the men. I should have seen it coming. The whispers, the closed-door meetings, the sudden interest my brothers took in every aspect of the business they'd ignored for years. But I was too busy dividing my time between hospital visits and keeping Walker and Company running to notice the coup forming right under my nose. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Dad's stroke. Subject line: Urgent board meeting. Wednesday, 9 a.m. Sent by Mason's assistant, not Mason himself. Strange, I muttered, scanning the sparse details. The conference room at our headquarters. Full board attendance required. No agenda attached. I called Mason immediately. Straight to voicemail. I tried Tyler. Same result. That night, I barely slept. Instead, I prepared a comprehensive update on our operations, Q1 projections, production timelines, marketing plans, everything they might want to discuss. A small voice whispered that something was wrong, but I silenced it. These were my brothers. My family. Wednesday morning dawned gray and bitter cold. I dressed casually, jeans, a Walker and Company sweater, ankle boots, my standard work attire. When I arrived at the office, Claire, our receptionist for 5 years, wouldn't meet my eyes. "They're waiting for you in the conference room," she said softly. I pushed open the door and froze. Mason and Tyler sat on one side of the table in matching navy suits, suits I'd never seen before. Beside them was a stranger, silver-haired, sharp-featured, Manhattan written all over his Italian loafers and gold cufflinks. Across from them sat our company lawyer, Richard Patel, looking uncomfortable. The final seat was occupied by Vince Thompson, our CFO, studying his hands with intense concentration. "Sonia," Mason stood, gesturing to the lone, empty chair. "This is Gavin Brooks from Meridian Capital. He's interested in taking Walker and Company public." The stranger didn't stand. Instead, he assessed me like I was merchandise, not management. "Ms. Walker," Brooks nodded curtly. "I've heard a lot about you." I sat down slowly, acutely aware of my casual clothes among their formal attire. "Funny, I've heard nothing about you." Mason cleared his throat. "Gavin approached us a couple weeks ago. With Dad's condition, we thought it prudent to explore new growth avenues." "Without consulting me?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Tyler jumped in. We didn't want to burden you while you're handling Dad's care. The same excuse. Different day. Brooks leaned forward. Walker and Company has impressive numbers, but it's hitting a growth ceiling. You need capital to scale, and Meridian can provide that, along with the expertise to take you public within 18 months. We're growing at 30% year over year, I countered. Our margins are healthy. We don't need outside capital that will dilute our ownership and control. 30% isn't enough, Brooks dismissed with a wave. Not for a company with your potential. Walker and Company could be the next Reformation or Everlane, but you're thinking too small. Before I could respond, Mason slid a document across the table. We've already signed a preliminary agreement. You what? I snatched the papers, scanning the legal text. You have no authority to do this without board approval. Actually, Richard said, speaking for the first time, as CEO, Mason does have that authority for preliminary negotiations. Mason smoothed his tie. We're not here to debate that. We're here to discuss leadership structure moving forward. The room suddenly felt airless. What does that mean? Tyler couldn't meet my eyes. Meridian's analysis suggests our executive team needs restructuring to attract serious investors. Brooks took over. Your operational skills are impressive, Ms. Walker, but taking a company public requires a different leadership profile. Investors respond to proven executive experience. Which I have, I said coldly. I built this company from nothing to $20 million. Without the title or training, Brooks countered. The market values credentials, MBAs, executive track records. He nodded toward Mason. Your brother has both. On paper. I laughed incredulously. Everyone in this room knows who actually runs this company. Perception matters in the market, Brooks shrugged. We're proposing that Mason continues as CEO, with you transitioning to a strategic advisory role. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. You're pushing me out. We're elevating you, Tyler said quickly. You'll be free to focus on product development and creative direction, your strengths. Let Mason handle the investor relations, the roadshows, the regulatory compliance. And where were you two when I was building this company? When I was working 80-hour weeks? When I was convincing Dad to take that big risk, you were too afraid to back. My voice had risen despite my best efforts to stay calm. Mason's expression hardened. This isn't personal, Sonia. It's business. It's my business, I hissed. It's our family's business, he corrected. And Dad always intended for me to lead it. Dad isn't here, I said, the words hanging heavy in the air. Mason leaned back. Exactly. Which is why we need to make decisions that secure the company's future. The board has already voted. I turned to Vince, who still wouldn't look at me. You voted for this? He nodded miserably. The numbers make sense, Sonia. The capital infusion alone. I stood, hands shaking. This is a mistake. You need me. We're keeping you on, Tyler insisted. Just in a different capacity. As a figurehead. After I did all the work while you played golf. The door opened and Emily, our HR director, entered with another folder. The severance details. The transition plan. The new org chart with my name demoted and pushed to the side. We need your decision today, Mason said, all pretense of brotherly affection gone. Either transition to the advisory role or take the severance package. I looked around the table at the men who were stealing my life's work, at the company I'd built with my own hands, and made my choice. I'll clean out my desk. I walked out with my head high, signed the severance agreement without reading it, and handed over my keycard to Claire, who was openly crying now. By 2 p.m., I was locked out of all company systems. By 3 p.m., my personal belongings were packed in a cardboard box. By 4 p.m., I was driving home in stunned silence. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what I was about to do. They thought I'd vanish quietly. They didn't know what I'd already done. The first week after my ousting passed in a blur of anger and disbelief. I barely left my apartment, alternating between rage-filled pacing and moments of paralyzing grief. Walker and Company wasn't just a company to me. It was my creation, my purpose, my legacy. and my own flesh and blood had stolen it. On day 8, Jenna showed up unannounced, armed with takeout and determination. "You look terrible," she announced, pushing past me into the apartment. "Thanks," I muttered, sinking back onto my couch, surrounded by empty coffee mugs and half-finished to-do lists with no purpose. Enough wallowing. She unpacked cartons of Thai food. "What's your plan?" "Plan." I laughed bitterly. "They won. Game over." Jenna rolled her eyes. The Sonia Walker I know doesn't give up, especially not when her backstabbing brothers are trying to take credit for her work. I picked at my pad thai, silent for a long moment. Remember when that supplier in Portland tried to double their prices overnight with Becker Designs last year? The competitor that went under? Sure. That's when I created Lakeside Supply, I said quietly. Jenna put down her fork. "The company that handles your vendor contracts? What about it?" I smiled for the first time in days. "Mason and Tyler think Walker and Company has direct relationships with all our suppliers. But they don't. Every contract, from cotton to packaging, runs through Lakeside first. And Lakeside is? Mine. 100%. They were so disinterested in operations that neither of them ever noticed. Dad knew, but he trusted me to handle the details." I took a sip of wine. "They've effectively cut me out of Walker and Company, but Walker and Company can't function without Lakeside Supply." Understanding dawned on Jenna's face. "So, you control the supply chain." "Every thread, button, and shipping box," I confirmed. "And those contracts have exclusivity clauses. These suppliers can't work directly with Walker and Company even if they wanted to." "Sonia Walker," Jenna whispered, "you magnificent, devious genius." I wasn't proud of the deception, but I wasn't sorry either. I'd created Lakeside as insurance after watching too many women entrepreneurs get pushed out of their own companies by male co-founders or investors. I never thought my own brothers would be the ones to prove me right. The next morning, I drove 3 hours north to my family's lake cabin near Duluth. The remote property had been our summer retreat growing up, but was now seldom used since my brothers preferred luxury resorts. The rustic cabin, with its weathered pine exterior and panoramic views of Lake Superior, had always been my sanctuary. I set up my laptop on the old oak dining table, the same table where Dad had taught us to play poker and count change. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd taught us games of strategy, but never imagined we'd use those skills against each other. First, I called Maria Chen, my most trusted designer, who'd been with me since the early days. "Sonia," she answered, her voice dropping to a whisper. "My God, it's chaos here. No one knows what's happening." "Tell me everything," I said, taking notes as she described the aftermath of my departure. Mason had moved into my office the same day. Tyler was suddenly micromanaging the creative team. Gavin Brooks had installed his own financial analyst who was questioning every expense. Worst of all, they'd already laid off 3 senior women I'd personally hired, citing restructuring needs. "And the supply issues started yesterday," Maria added. "The organic cotton shipment from Texas never arrived. Mason's blaming logistics delays, but no one can get straight answers." I thanked her and promised to stay in touch. Next, I called Lakeside's small legal team, just 2 sharp attorneys I'd hired specifically for their experience with supply chain contracts. "It's time," I told them. "Implement the contingency plan." Over the next 2 weeks, I watched from my Lakeside exile as the dominoes began to fall. First came the missing cotton shipment. Then the packaging materials were unexpectedly backordered. The specialty dyes from Oregon were held up in quality control. One by one, the components needed for Walker and Company's production ground to a mysterious halt. Each day, I reviewed reports from my Lakeside team. Walker and Company's customer service department was being flooded with complaints about shipping delays. Their Amazon ratings were plummeting. The fall collection, my last project before being ousted, was supposed to launch in 3 weeks, but without materials, the factory stood idle. My phone lit up with increasingly desperate texts from Tyler. "What's happening with our suppliers? Nobody will give me straight answers." Then, "Do you know anyone at that Texas mill? They're ghosting us." Finally, Sonia, if you know something, please. The IPO people are breathing down our necks. I left them all unanswered, watching the crisis unfold from afar. Mason tried a more direct approach. He called Lakeside's main line repeatedly, but my team had instructions to say only that supply chain disruptions were affecting many companies in the industry, and that Ms. Walker was unavailable. The truth was both simpler and more complex. Lakeside Supply was fulfilling its contractual obligations to the letter, just very, very slowly. No laws were being broken. No contracts violated. Just a sudden, unfortunate series of delays and quality control issues that happened to affect every aspect of Walker and Company's production pipeline. 3 weeks into my exile, Maria called again. They know, she said without preamble. Brooks figured it out. He had someone look into Lakeside's incorporation documents. Mason threw a chair through the conference room window when he realized you own it. I smiled at the mental image. Good. What's your endgame here, Sonia? They're talking about suing you. Let them try, I replied calmly. Every contract is ironclad. I'm not doing anything illegal, just experiencing unfortunate business delays, same as any company might. The truth was, I wasn't entirely sure of my endgame. Part of me wanted revenge, to watch them suffer as they realized how completely they'd underestimated me. But another part, the businesswoman who'd built something valuable from nothing, couldn't bear to see Walker and Company destroyed, even despite my brothers. The decision was made for me the next day when a black SUV rolled up my cabin's gravel driveway. Mason, Tyler, and Gavin Brooks had come to negotiate. I didn't bother changing out of my sweatpants to greet them. They built their kingdom on sand, and I was the tide. I watched through the cabin window as they emerged from the SUV. Mason first, his normally perfect hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. Tyler next, nervously checking his phone. Finally, Gavin Brooks, his Manhattan polish noticeably frayed around the edges as he surveyed my rustic hideaway with undisguised disdain. I met them at the door before they could knock, arms crossed. It's a long drive back to Minneapolis, I said coolly. You might want to state your business quickly. Mason stepped forward. This has gone far enough, Sonia. Has it? I leaned against the doorframe. I'm just getting started. Let us in, Brooks demanded. We need to talk like adults. I considered turning them away out of spite, but curiosity won out. I stepped aside, watching as the 3 men who'd ambushed me now entered my territory on my terms. Nice place, Tyler said awkwardly, taking in the cabin's simple interior. Skip the small talk, I replied. Why are you here? Mason sat down heavily on the sofa. We're in trouble. Sounds like a you problem. It's an us problem, he insisted. Walker and Company is about to implode. Production is at a standstill. We've missed 3 major retailer deliveries. Our Amazon rating dropped from 4.8 to 2.3 stars in 2 weeks. I poured myself a cup of coffee, deliberately not offering them any. I'm sure your Harvard Business School professors covered supply chain management at some point. Brooks stepped forward. Cut the games, Ms. Walker. We know about Lakeside Supply. We know what you're doing. And what exactly am I doing, Mr. Brooks? You're sabotaging the company. I laughed. I'm running my business, Lakeside Supply, according to its established procedures. If Walker and Company is experiencing difficulties with its supplier, perhaps its leadership should examine their approach. This is blackmail, Mason hissed. This is consequences, I corrected. You wanted to run the company? Run it. But you're discovering what I've always known you can't. Tyler, always the peacemaker, tried a different angle. Sonia, please. We have investors breathing down our necks. The IPO roadshow starts in 6 weeks. Brooks Capital has already invested $2 million in pre-IPO funding. That's fascinating, I said, examining my nails. Were they aware that Walker and Company doesn't actually control its own supply chain when they made that investment? Brooks' face darkened. What do you want? Nothing from you, I replied. I'm quite content up here. The lake is beautiful this time of year. Mason pulled out his phone. Look at these numbers. I glanced at the screen. Daily sales had plummeted 78%. Customer returns were up 300%. Their cash runway, once comfortable at 18 months, had shrunk to less than 4. This isn't just about us, Mason argued. There are 100 employees who could lose their jobs. People you hired. People you care about. He wasn't wrong. Each day of my revenge, I'd thought about Maria, Claire, the production team, the customer service reps, all the people who'd helped me build Walker & Company and who now faced uncertainty because of my brother's betrayal and my response. The company's on the brink of collapse, Tyler added. Dad's recovery has stalled because he's so stressed about what's happening. That hit home. I hadn't visited Dad in over a week, unable to face him without revealing the war between his children. What exactly do you propose? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. The 3 men exchanged glances. Mason cleared his throat. We want to offer you your job back. I raised an eyebrow. As what? The advisory role you so generously created when you pushed me out? As Chief Operating Officer, Brooks interjected. Equal leadership with Mason, equal votes on the board. Not good enough, I said without hesitation. What do you want? Mason asked, desperation edging into his voice. I'd had 3 weeks to think about this moment. 3 weeks of angry journaling, of late-night strategy sessions with Jenna, of weighing my options and what I truly valued. I want 60% controlling interest in Walker & Company. The room went silent. That's impossible, Brooks finally said. The current equity structure will be restructured. I interrupted. I want 60% ownership, reconstituted board with 2 seats of my choosing, and licensing fees paid to Lakeside for all supplier contracts. You're insane, Mason sputtered. You can't just demand. I'm not demanding. I'm offering a solution to your crisis. I stood up, suddenly tired of the conversation. Take it or leave it. But know that without my cooperation, Walker & Company has approximately 3 weeks before major retailers cancel their orders permanently. Tyler looked physically ill. The company will never recover from that. No, I agreed. It won't. We need time to consider, Brooks said. You have until noon tomorrow, I replied. After that, Lakeside Supply begins terminating its contracts with Walker & Company altogether. Good luck finding new suppliers with your timeline and specifications. I showed them to the door, watching as they trudged back to their SUV, shoulders slumped in defeat. That night, I sat on the dock, feet dangling in the cool lake water, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. For the first time since my ousting, I felt something other than anger, a quiet certainty that I was about to reclaim what was rightfully mine. My phone buzzed at 11:43 p.m. A text from Mason. We'll sign your terms. Lawyers drafting paperwork now. I looked up at the stars and smiled. Tomorrow, I would return to Minneapolis not as the little sister, not as the behind-the-scenes workhorse, but as the majority owner of Walker & Company. They'd thought they could discard me. They'd thought wrong. The tide wasn't just turning, it had already changed direction, and it was about to sweep everything clean. They came in suits. I answered in sweatpants. The morning of my return to Walker & Company headquarters, I made a deliberate choice. While my brothers would undoubtedly arrive in their matching navy suits, I chose comfort. Black sweatpants, a Walker & Company hoodie from our very first collection, and sneakers. This wasn't about looking the part anymore. I was the part. Are you sure about this? Jenna asked as she drove me to the office. She'd insisted on being my moral support. You could at least wear your power blazer. This is my power outfit now, I replied, glancing at the thick folder of legal documents in my lap. The framework for my return crafted by 3 attorneys who'd worked through the night. They don't get to dictate the terms anymore. Not even the dress code. The lobby fell silent when I walked in. Claire, at the reception desk, broke into a spontaneous grin before quickly composing herself. Employees peered over cubicles, whispering behind hands. I nodded to familiar faces as I made my way to the conference room, the same room where I'd been ambushed just 4 weeks earlier. Inside waited the same cast of characters, Mason and Tyler, looking haggard in their expensive suits, Gavin Brooks, whose perpetual scowl had deepened, Richard Patel, our company lawyer, now flanked by two attorneys I didn't recognize, and Vince Thompson, our CFO, who couldn't quite meet my eyes. New to the tableau were my own lawyers, Amara Okafor, a razor-sharp expert in corporate reorganizations, and David Chen, who specialized in supply chain law and had helped me structure Lakeside from the beginning. "Gentlemen," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table, Mason's usual spot. "Let's not waste time." For the next 3 hours, we negotiated the final details of what my lawyers had dubbed the Restoration Agreement. The core terms remained as I demanded: 60% controlling interest in Walker and Company transferred to me, a restructured board with 2 seats reserved for my appointees, and a formal supplier agreement between Walker and Company and Lakeside with set fees and penalties for early termination. Mason barely spoke, his jaw clenched so tight I worried for his teeth. Tyler fidgeted nervously, occasionally offering conciliatory comments that no one acknowledged. Brooks, realizing his IPO dreams were slipping away, fought for every concession, but we all knew who held the leverage. "This licensing fee structure is highway robbery," he growled, jabbing a finger at page 17 of the agreement. "It's industry standard plus 2%, Amara replied coolly. "A small price for supply chain stability, wouldn't you say?" By noon, we had a deal. Mason looked physically ill as he signed the final document. Tyler's hand trembled slightly with his signature. Brooks signed with such force he tore through the paper. When it was done, I stood. Effective immediately, production will resume normal operations. All suppliers will fulfill back orders within 72 hours. The fall collection will launch as scheduled next week. Just like that, Brooks asked sarcastically. Just like that, I confirmed, sending a text to my Lakeside team with a single word. Approved. What about the IPO? Mason finally asked, his voice hollow. I sat back down, folding my hands on the table. The IPO will proceed, but on a revised timeline. 6 months, not 6 weeks. We need to stabilize operations and rebuild customer confidence first. Meridian Capital expects, Brooks began. Meridian Capital nearly invested in a company that couldn't deliver its own products. I cut him off. I suggest you adjust your expectations based on that reality. The meeting concluded. My brothers slunk out without another word. Brooks lingered, sizing me up with a new calculation in his eyes. You're not what I expected, Ms. Walker, he said finally. That seems to be everyone's problem, I replied. As the room cleared, Vince Thompson remained, fidgeting with his pen. I should have stood up for you, he said quietly. I knew what you meant to this company. I was a coward. I studied him for a moment. Vince had been one of my earliest hires, a brilliant financial mind who'd helped structure our growth. His betrayal had stung particularly hard. Yes, you were, I agreed. But you're also the best CFO this company could have. Stay, help me rebuild, and we'll consider it water under the bridge. Relief washed over his face. Thank you, Sonia. Don't thank me yet. Your first task is untangling the financial mess my brothers made in 4 weeks. I want a complete report by Monday. After everyone left, I sat alone in the conference room, allowing myself a moment to absorb what had just happened. 4 weeks ago, I'd walked out of this room stripped of my role, my company, my purpose. Now I returned not just restored but elevated, the majority owner of everything I'd built. My phone rang. It was the rehab facility. Ms. Walker, your father is asking for you. He seems agitated. Something about the company. Tell him I'm on my way, I said, gathering my things. The drive to the rehabilitation center gave me time to consider how to approach this conversation. Dad had always favored Mason, had always believed that his oldest son should lead the family business. How would he react to the news that his daughter had outmaneuvered his sons and taken control? I found him in the garden, his wheelchair positioned to catch the afternoon sun. His right side remained partially paralyzed, but his mind was sharp as ever. His eyes tracked me as I approached. Is it true? He asked without preamble, his speech slightly slurred but understandable. I sat beside him. That depends on what you've heard. Mason called. Said you've taken over the company. Said you tricked them with some supply company. His gaze was penetrating despite his physical frailty. Is it true? I took a deep breath. I created a separate supply chain company 2 years ago to protect Walker and Company. When they pushed me out, that protection became leverage. Yes, I now own controlling interest in the company. I expected anger, disappointment, perhaps even accusations. Instead, Dad surprised me with a sound I hadn't heard since before his stroke. Laughter. They never stood a chance, did they? He chuckled, his good hand reaching for mine. My golden girl. Always 3 steps ahead. I wasn't just back. I was in charge. The first week after reclaiming Walker and Company felt like defusing a bomb, while simultaneously rebuilding an engine. My brother's brief reign had left substantial damage, plummeting employee morale, threatening retail partners, and a storm of customer complaints about delayed orders. I started where it mattered most, with the people. I won't pretend the last month didn't happen. I told the assembled staff in the company atrium. But Walker and Company is entering a new era. One where the people who do the work are valued, recognized, and rewarded. My first action was rehiring the 3 senior women my brothers had laid off, promoting them with expanded roles and equity. My second was introducing a profit-sharing program for all employees. My third was symbolic but powerful. I had Built by Women, Led by Women, painted in bold letters across our headquarters' main wall. Mason and Tyler were conspicuously absent. As per our agreement, they remained on the board but had been relocated to market development roles requiring extensive travel. Mason to Europe, Tyler to Asia. Beautiful exile with generous expense accounts, but no actual power. Gavin Brooks, surprisingly, remained engaged. After our confrontation, he developed what I can only describe as reluctant respect. You're not what I expected, he admitted during a strategy session. Most founders I've worked with don't have your backbone. Most founders you've worked with were men, I replied. We learned backbone early. He conceded with a nod. The revised IPO timeline was smart. 6 months will actually maximize valuation. Our relationship wasn't friendly, but it was effective. Brooks knew markets and investor psychology. I knew operations and vision. Together, we crafted a roadmap to not just recover, but emerge stronger. The fall collection launched to record sales, partly fueled by curiosity about the company's dramatic behind-the-scenes changes that had somehow leaked to fashion blogs. Our sustainable practices and transparent supply chain, now formally managed through Lakeside, became central to our brand story. 3 months after my return, I invited Maria and Jenna to dinner. To Operation Phoenix, Jenna toasted. Rising from the ashes never looked so good. The office feels completely different now, Maria added. People are excited again. And my brothers are actually closing international accounts, I said. Mason landed that German department store last week. Will you ever forgive them? Jenna asked, suddenly serious. I considered this. Forgiveness isn't really the point. They're family. But trust? That's earned, not given. Even to brothers. The IPO preparations consumed the next quarter. I worked closely with our expanded leadership team, now 60% women, to ensure every aspect of our business could withstand scrutiny. Dad, improving steadily, provided counsel from his home office. Triple-check the revenue projections, he advised. Brooks will want to inflate them. Conservative numbers that you beat look better than ambitious ones you miss. It was the first time Dad had spoken to me as a true business equal. The stroke had changed him, made him acknowledge what had always been true, that his golden girl had been the business genius all along. The day before our IPO, I visited Lakeside's offices. The small team that had executed my leverage play greeted me with applause. I have something for each of you, I said, handing out envelopes containing Walker and Company stock options. Tomorrow, these become very valuable. You helped save this company. You deserve to share in its success. The morning of our IPO, I woke before dawn and dressed with deliberate care, a custom-tailored Walker and Company pantsuit, subtle makeup, and the small gold compass necklace Dad had given me at graduation. To help you find your way, he'd said then. Little did he know how literally I'd take that guidance. The opening bell ceremony was surreal. My leadership team flanked me on the platform. Maria, Vince, our new COO Priya, and yes, Mason and Tyler, who had returned looking uncomfortably supportive. Brooks stood nearby, already calculating his return on investment. When Walker and Company stock began trading at 30% above our offering price, the floor erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed. Reporters called questions. In that moment, I caught Mason's eye across the platform. Something passed between us. Not forgiveness, but recognition. Acknowledgement of a new reality. That evening, as celebration champagne flowed, Dad arrived using a walker instead of his wheelchair, a recent improvement he'd kept secret. "I'm proud of you, Sonia," he said, eyes misty. "You didn't just save the company. You made it better than I ever imagined." I hugged him carefully. "I had a good teacher."
He shook his head. "No.
"You had something better. You had vision I never possessed and courage I never tested." My phone buzzed with a news alert. I found my face looking back from the Wall Street Journal homepage. Walker and Company. IPO exceeds expectations. How Sonia Walker transformed a family business into a market leader. The article mentioned our built by women, led by women ethos, our sustainable practices, and the leadership transition that had briefly threatened the company. The journalist had somehow learned enough to hint at the drama without knowing its full extent. I smiled, pocketing my phone. Some stories were better kept within the family. What mattered wasn't how I'd reclaimed my company, but what I would do with it now that it was truly mine. The company they had pushed me out of? I now own the majority of it. The vision they had tried to sideline? It was now our core brand identity. The little sister they had underestimated? She had become the queen.